Hello and welcome to Clock Spinning, the podcast of Magic's history as told card by card through Cube. I'm Austin, and with me as always is my co-host Connor. You got any good maggot-related anecdotes for us today, Connor, or did you use them all up last episode?
Thankfully, I don't have any new maggot stories. I've been seeing an uptick in bees around the neighborhood lately, for what that's worth.
That's a more desirable arthropod for sure.
Yeah. I'm still a little scared of them, but I can tolerate them more than a bunch of writhing maggots in a yard debris bin.
Have you ever been stung? I know I've been stung a hell of a lot of times, but I can't recall ever seeing you get stung.
Oh yeah, I've been stung. I got stung on the ear once when I was probably 10. And this is back when George Bush #2 was president.
Oh boy, that makes it a lot harder.
Well, he was caricatured with big ears.
That's right.
Because he does kind of have big ears, but not as big as my ear when it was stung.
That's right. The Economist would always draw him with these like satellite dish ears.
Yeah, so that's kind of what one of my ears looked like when it was stung.
Huh. You should have used that to go do impressions or something.
Yeah, I should have leveraged that a little more when I was 10.
Well, today we're diving in and starting our review of the red cards of Champions of Kamigawa. If you're tuning in for the first time and you're still here after the maggot and ear talk, we're in the midst of a card-by-card review of the original Kamigawa block. If you'd like, you can jump back to episode 1 to hear about our Impab rating system and a little bit about the block, and then, dive in as we go card by card. But I don't know, anything else, Connor, before we just get started on all these Akki and Oni?
Oh, just that I wish you hadn't said maggot and ear, because that reminded me of the Ron Spencer card that you shared with me the last episode. I'm not going to repeat the name of it here, so no one has to suffer as we did. But
no, nobody go look at Ron Spencer's art on Scryfall without, just preparing yourself mentally for trauma.
Yeah, and don't eat first.
No.
But let's get into these.
Okay, so sounds good. All right, first up, we have Akki Avalanchers. Akki Avalanchers is a single red for a 1/1 Goblin Warrior. Sack a land. Akki Avalanchers gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Play this ability only once each turn. This is a disappointing place to start our review. There's a lot of 1-mana 1/1s in this block. There's just no getting around it. Most of them don't have abilities or interesting things to do that justify them. I think this does get a little bit closer than most. Being able to go to a 3/1 does threaten some serious damage, and that's pretty cool. But the fact you can only do it once a turn, and the fact that red just frankly isn't very well positioned to be an aggressive color, we'll see that throughout here. Red is A, probably the worst color in the set, and B, what it does do is kind of spells and mid-rangey stuff. I don't know if I can see this thing getting there. What do you think, Connor?
Yeah, I mean, I just felt like this was a really depressing card to start our reviews or to start a game with. Sure, it's a 1-mana 1/1. And that's about the best I can say for it. Like, at least give these some haste or something. Like, give the Avalanchers a little something other than a not very exciting ability that you have to pay for by giving up a land, which you're not going to want to do probably on turn 2 or 3 of the game.
Yeah, and then only once each turn, just as a little bit of extra salt in the wound.
Yeah, just to make sure you can't use this to, close out a game or trade up too far.
No, we wouldn't want that. I will say, I really, really like this art. All of the Akki, or most of the Akki, are a little bit goofy. They're a little bit comical, as goblins often are in Magic. They're also profoundly strange looking. So they're these kind of, I don't even know how to describe them. They're these sort of turtle, demon, goblin, spiky creatures. And here they're about to roll a gigantic snowball off a cliff to hit somebody with it. And I think that is that's pretty hilarious.
I do like the art a lot. I think I like pretty much all of the Akki art. I realized today as I was going through and looking at just Akki after Akki that most of them look pretty much the same. They're all kind of indistinguishable from each other, which I guess is probably true of most goblins in Magic, but maybe these more than most.
Yeah, that's true. They all look pretty much completely identical, which is kind of makes them feel more like a kind of, semi-sentient tribe or something.
Right. Like look at these 3 in this art. They're all the same Akki.
Yeah, they're all kind of clones, but I still like the design of them, and I think this art is very fun and just nice kind of old school piece of fantasy art too. It's very painterly. It's very clearly non-digital. It's just a fun piece. So where do you land on including this? I had it at a 2x meh just because I was like, I guess we need some 2-drops, but honestly, or 1-drops. But honestly, the more I've thought about it, the more I'm like, do we really need a 1-drop in a color that can barely support aggro? And is the 1-drop we would need a 1-mana 1/1 with a poor ability?
Well, I feel like this is already kind of raising a question that I think is lurking in the background with all the cards that we're talking about in red, which is whether we want red to be fully fleshed out color in the cube, one that has, the same representation as the other colors in terms of number of cards, in terms of sort of the mana curve that we're ideally trying to create, whether we want that, or do we want red to be kind of taking more of a backseat role and having, being kind of more of a support color that would be something you splash into now and then.
Yeah, it's hard because, the vast majority of cubes and basically every Magic set are color balanced. And so not being color balanced is kind of tricky for the drafters, particularly if it's not extreme. Like if the cube was just like, there are no red cards, that's easy to understand. But if it's like there are slightly less red cards, like even if you intellectually understand that, I feel like it's going to be hard to draft around. It's like, okay, does that mean I should never move into red? Or the problem is you're saying the red cards are they're just bad. Most of them are really bad.
Yeah.
But I still am reluctant to go color imbalance. I just feel like that's going to create some really difficult play situations.
I'd like to avoid it if we can, but even with it being color balanced, I feel like these little guys are not going to be making the cut.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. And I also think like red is, whatever the quantity is, I suspect red is more a support color than the other colors are. All the other colors have some pretty strong reasons to kind of go play them, even on their own. And I don't really see that in red in this set. I think if you were a mono red drafter, you're going to be sad.
Well, we've both of us in some recent test games consciously tried going into red as we were drafting. I think it was like triple champions that we were doing. I think we're pretty shocked by how terrible it was.
Yeah, there's some bombs coming up, like things like Glacial Ray or Godo, or yeah, you're right. It's like you keep waiting for the payoffs, and like payoffs are always a little smaller in Kamigawa, but honestly in red, you're like, oh, a gray ogre, get in the deck, and that's even in Kamigawa, that's not really making the grade.
Yeah, it's already a set where the highs are very high and the lows are very low, and I feel like in red the lows are very low and the highs still aren't that high.
Are pretty low, yeah.
It's just everything's a little bit lower.
Well, and just frankly, especially all of the cards with Akki in their name in this set, there's one of them I think is okay. And anyway, I don't want to spoil things, but it's not going to get better for a little while, so just bear with us.
Yeah, it's fitting that our first card is Akki Avalanchers rolling a big snowball down a hill, because it's kind of all downhill from here.
So I said I was okay with Instacut, but I actually think I want to push you a little bit towards Mad, because I want it in the mix as we evaluate curves and color balance later on.
You mean you want it just kind of in here because it's a 1-mana?
Yeah, I don't want it totally out of mind until we go back and massage the cube later. I'm not confident that we can just cut it willy-nilly.
Okay. All right, that's reasonable. How many do you want?
2-ish, I guess. I don't know. That's probably wrong, honestly, because maybe it should be more like 4 so that you could have a decent density of 1-drops. I don't think anyone really wants 4. Let's put 4 of them. You know what? Screw it. Let's see if there's any kind of aggro support we can manufacture.
Apparently, we're all in on these guys.
We are all in on the Avalanches. Well, it's just the art. The art equities here is super high.
That's true. Okay, let's go to our next Akki, who's a little more exciting, to me at least. We've got Akki Coalflinger. 1 RR for a 2/2 Goblin Shaman with first strike. Pay 1 red mana and tap him to give attacking creatures first strike until end of turn. My first note on this is that this is a big misreading trap for both of us. His ability only applies to attacking creatures. I need to explain this before Austin gets it wrong. His ability only applies to attacking creatures, yours or your opponent's, so you cannot use them on defense.
Okay, wow, that could be bad, not only in reading the cards and evaluating them on the podcast. Can you imagine using this on defense? Just kind of like, yeah, gotcha. Oh, Oh, like that's got to have happened to someone, right?
That's exactly the kind of thing I would do. So I need to be extra
I'd be
careful.
like, could I take that back? And it would lead to some feel bads, no matter what the answer was.
Yeah, Akki feel bad.
What do you think of the card?
I think he's surprisingly solid. You know, the double designated hurts, especially in red and at 3 mana, but like giving everybody first strike is, I think, a pretty big deal, especially based on our experiences with the Kitsune Blade Master. Like, this could really help you get through.
I like this thing a lot. I think the reason I like it primarily is Wizards nowadays largely steers clear of feel bad designs, I think to a fault. I think there is a place in Magic for cards that are a little bit, that play more fun than they read, or that feel like eating your vegetables. But there's a lot of vegetables in this set. I would say Akki Avalanchers is a vegetable. Like, it might be good, but it never feels good. And I think we're headed into a whole slew of vegetable cards. And Akki Coalflinger isn't a vegetable. It might not be a powerful card, but it's just fun. It's fun to go, I give all my things first strike. Like, that makes you feel powerful. That feels dramatic. It's a fun thing to do.
Yeah, and it's nice that he comes with first strike too, so you're not, which is kind of surprising to me. I feel like Kamigawa's style is more that he wouldn't actually be able to ever get first strike off this ability, but he just comes with it. It is kind of worth noting that you do have to tap him to give attacking creatures first strike, so he's leading from behind. He can't participate in the first striking attack.
Yeah, and the body here is honestly pretty weak. Double designated for a gray ogre with first strike it's not really getting there, honestly. This doesn't tussle that well with that many creatures, but I do think the ability is enough to make him strong. The other thing I think counts against him actually is red is not that great, but I think its 3-drops are its strongest suit. We've got Ronin Houndmaster, which might be the best kind of straight 3-drop in the set. We got the Yamazaki brothers. We got Akki Drillmaster coming up later. We got Pain Kami. Like, there's a lot of solid red 3-drops throughout the block, which I do think hurts the Coalflinger a little bit.
I do want to kind of comment on the art here, which is by Natsuo. It's a very poppy, high contrast piece. We're looking at this Coalflinger from really low angle, very dramatic pose, dramatic colors and shadows. And it really just shows like how weird looking the Akki are compared to, what we expect to see from a goblin. Like, this Coalflinger has a really oversized head, basically no neck. The head just sort of...
Very little torso even.
Yeah, it's just sort of a big head, a shell on the back, some arms sticking out of the side, some tiny little legs, just a really like weird form factor. And I feel like this card does a great job of highlighting the strangeness of the Akki.
Yeah, I get a real kind of manga vibe from this art. Something about the pose and the kind of red lines to show action and movement. I mean, I think they're supposed to be red magic, but to me, it feels very manga in a way I like.
Yeah.
So I have it as a playable 2x, and I think I'm on 2 just because cool, and I'm like, oh, a cool card. All right, 2.
I went with playable 1x, just because I feel like once you get one of these guys, you're good. You're not going to probably want to pick up a second one.
Yeah.
If another one comes around.
Yeah, I think that's a good argument. I'm persuaded by that.
Yeah, and you're not going to splash into red to do a Coalflinger.
I'll also say we haven't talked as much as I'd wish about kind of playability of cards in other cubes. I want to make a little quick plug for this guy. And I think if you had a quite low powered cube, this could be a fun card to sneak in as a red 3-drop. It does something really pretty unique and reasonably powerful that I think could be really fun in a lot of environments, as long as your power level is pretty low.
Something to think about.
All right, let's talk about our first red flip card, Akki Lavarunner. Akki Lavarunner is 3 in a red for a 1/1, yes, Goblin Warrior with haste. When this deals damage to an opponent, flip it. Okay. And it flips into Tok-Tok Volcano Born, 2/2, protection from red. If a red source would deal damage to a player, it deals that much damage +1 to that player instead. All right, now you can all see why we are kvetching about the red cards in this set. This is just just the first of, I believe, 3 4-mana 1/1s we're going to talk about in the next few minutes, which is pretty mind-boggling.
This one, you see it 4-mana 1/1, you're like, oh man, that's so awful. And then just a few cards later, you get to another, and then another. It makes you wonder what you're doing wrong to be playing red.
there's 28 creatures in the set, or red creatures in the set, and 3 of them are 4 mana 1/1. So that's fully 10% of all the red creatures in the set are 4 mana 1/1s. And that's just astonishing to me. I really don't know what they were thinking.
That's pretty rough.
Okay, so this card. So as a reminder, because there's a lot going on these flip cards, it's a 4 mana 1/1 with haste that flips when it connects. And then basically it adds 1 every time a red source would deal damage to a player.
And it becomes a 2/2 with protection from red.
And it becomes a 2/2 with pro red, which, by the way, it has 2 abilities. Is this the only flip card with 2 abilities when flipped?
We better not commit to that.
You know what? It doesn't matter because this card is still terrible. There are a lot of other cards that do similar things. Helion, for example, will do this for 5 mana, or a very similar effect for 5 mana on a good body with no need to flip. This thing's chance of flipping is, to my mind, extremely low. This is going to come down on 4 or 5. This format is slow, but everyone's going to have something by turn 4, and that something is always going to be able to block a 1/1. There is no creature. There's 1 creature in this block that can't trade with a 1/1 or just kill it. So I think this card is just terrible, and it almost doesn't matter what the flip text says.
Yeah, it's such a letdown from Black's flip creatures, that we looked at in our last couple episodes, which are just bombs, like real powerhouses, fun cards to play with, have a real impact on the game. And then you get to this, and it's hard enough to flip. It's painful enough to be playing a 4 mana 1/1, but then you flip him. That flip version is also pretty sad.
Yeah, it's like fine. I mean, it boosts all your creatures when they hit an opponent, which is, nice. If at least if red was able to be aggressive. Honestly, I feel like this thing, you could just cast it for the back half and it would be totally fair. It would not be overpowered at all.
Yeah. The only thing I could kind of think of that might make this at least maybe a little bit interesting would be to pair this with kind of the Yamazaki cards coming up later, like Frostwielder, Kumano, that tap or pay some mana to just ping something. Tok-Tok makes those a little bit better, but that's really stretching to make this like anything close to a card.
Yeah, I think it's just not a card. I really can't envision scenarios where it flips. There's not even that many things that give evasion in the set. There's like the Soratami Mirror Guard. There's a handful of things that will help this thing connect, but really not that many. So I just don't see how this thing ever flips. Is this an insta-cut?
It is for me.
Yeah. What do you think of the art? I think the art is fun. I like his giant green bug eyes on the unflipped side.
It's fine. I don't really like how he looks totally different in both versions.
Yeah, it's confusing. His whole facial shape has changed.
His shape, his big, eager eyes, and the Lavarunner form have just shriveled away into tiny little marbles when he's Tok-Tok.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at a different goblin here.
But what about him sticking his little tongue out? He's kind of like a dog.
I like that. He's cute. He's cute when he's a Lavarunner, and then he flips into
this tough, badass blue guy.
You can barely tell if he's tough or badass because all you see is like his head, a shoulder, and one hand.
Yeah, but how look at that hand. Look at all the
he's
the veins and stuff. He's tough.
He's pretty tough.
Okay, I think we can cut this thing and move on.
Well, let's move on to another great card.
There are interesting cards coming. Bear with us.
Hang in there. Just get through this sea of Akki. But first, Akki Rockspeaker. 1R for a 1/1 Goblin Shaman. When he comes into play, add R to your mana pool. So this is basically a 1 mana 1/1 that you can't play until turn 2.
This thing is, to me, almost inexplicable. I can kind of see that it's intended to, I guess, suggest combo potential or something, but it doesn't add enough mana to care. This thing could add red, and I think it would still be, like, honestly terrible. But the fact that it costs 2 to get you a 1/1 and then refunds your 1, so you basically have a 1 mana vanilla 1, like this.
You're not up anything. I mean, it basically is just a 1/1 that you can't play on turn 1.
It's like a 1 mana 1/1 with suspend 1 or something.
It's a nerfed 1 mana 1/1.
Okay, so I don't think this is getting played. I do think it's kind of interesting. There's a lot of ritual effects in this block. There's 4 ritual effects out of 110 cards, which strikes me as a lot. There's usually not that many red rituals or rituals in general. And this is also kind of early in Wizards, comparatively early in Wizards' decision to move mana rituals over to red. So, of course, the original ritual, Dark Ritual, is in black, and that stayed true pretty much through Odyssey block with Cabal Ritual. But then starting in Onslaught block, they started to tinker. There's 2 ritual effects, notably Skirk Prospector, which is Actually, this card should just be Skirk Prospector if that had a generic name. Mirrodin got 3, and then this block got 4. We're coming up on the actually good one, Desperate Ritual, later. I think the problem is, like, rituals aren't very good in cube. Like, they're good in combo-heavy vintage cubes where it really matters to either get ahead on tempo or storm off. But in this cube, I mean, we'll talk about this more with Desperate Ritual. I just don't know if there's a place for rituals. This set is about grinding out value over time, not tempo.
Yeah, and this does neither.
Yeah, no, this thing's just an easy insta-cut, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about our next 4-mana 1/1, Akki Underminer.
Woo!
Akki Underminer is 3 and an R for a 1/1 Goblin Rogue Shaman. Very cool type line.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Whenever Akki Underminer deals combat damage to a player, that player sacrifices a permanent. Okay, this card is terrible. I think the reason it's terrible is there's a couple reasons. Like, one, it's a 4-mana 1/1. 4-mana 1/1s need to do a lot of work to justify their existence. There's not, as we talked about with the Akki Lavarunner, there's not that many ways to usher this thing through to connect with your opponent. And then even when you connect, honestly, it's not backbreaking. It's kind of annoying. Like, your opponent sacks a land or maybe sacks 2 land before they find a way to deal with your indomitable 1/1. Like, this card is just terrible.
Yeah, it's like Akki Lavarunner, where, you know, it's really difficult to set it up, and then the payoff just isn't even that great.
It's even worse than Akki Lavarunner's payoff, right? Like, that at least kind of has a broad effect on the board, and it's kind of interesting. Like, this thing is just, I don't know. Your opponent is going to be mildly inconvenienced unless you hit them like 3+ times.
Yeah, I do love the art though.
Uh-huh.
Thomas Baxa did this one. He also brought us Scuttling Death from last episode, but this is a lot more charming.
He's making up for his past sins.
Yeah, I guess so. I really like the way that the Aki's portrayed in this one. You know, he looks just like every other Akki, but this one kind of has a flatter skull, looks a little more devious and devilish, a little more stylized.
I find him a little derpy, but in a charming way.
He is a little bit derpy with the pose.
Yeah, his pose is a little bit like, he looks a little confused, maybe a little bit punch drunk or something.
Well, speaking of confused, I'm really not sure what the undermining is that's supposed to be happening here.
Fully above ground?
He's fully above ground. He's like standing in some grass with like an exploding statue
totem pole thing behind him.
And he's like holding a torch. So I don't know what he was undermining, but it seems like there was a bit of a disconnect between the art and the name.
Is he like burning the field here or something? I mean, none of the grass is on fire, but
he's working on it.
Could be.
Give him some time.
He's getting around to it.
You know, those long arms, short legs. It's hard to get around.
Well, you know, he's had a few. You know, he's not moving super quick.
Nope.
Yeah, I like how his torch has like a kind of fiery skull, kind of like, you know, it's actually not a torch. It's more like a branding iron. And that same symbol, it looks like, appears on the totem pole thing. So that's kind of cool.
Huh.
Yeah.
But even more confusing.
Yeah, it's pretty confusing, but cool. Very cool art.
Yeah. Not a cool card, though.
No. Yeah, I assume you're an insta-cut on this?
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. It's just bad.
Yeah, it really is, unfortunately, just a bad card.
All right, we finally made it through the first wave of Akki, and we are coming up on Battle Mad Ronin. 1R for a 1/1 human samurai with Bushido 2, and he attacks each turn if able. This is our first red samurai, and I'm not sure if this is universal, but sort of the theme, the flavor behind red samurai in this set is that they're all Ronin, like a wandering warrior rather than a samurai who's, you know, sworn to serve a particular lord. So,
which is pretty cool that the white samurai are all, you know, part of the army or the regular kind of forces, and there are red samurai, but they're all kind of lone wolves. I think that's pretty fun.
Yeah, and in this guy's case, his flavor text says, "I fought fiercely, bravely, and without mercy. Had I not struck down my captain in the heat of battle, I might have become a hero instead of an outcast." So he used to be probably serving a lord or something, and then he committed sort of the ultimate party foul among samurai.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like they covered that early in training. Like, don't hit your captain.
It's kind of a big deal if you do that.
Yeah, they don't like it. They take away much of your power and toughness. They let you keep the Bushido, but they say, you know what, we're busting you down to a 1/1, buddy.
They let you keep the Bushido. They let you keep all of your weapons. in his case, he has like
he's got about 40,
maybe like 3 katanas.
Yeah, you're right. He's got 3 katanas and a poleaxe.
Yeah, so he's set on all of those, but it's not helping him very much, at least when he's hitting an opponent.
And he's got an incredible like furry cape, and he's super swole. I mean, this guy's like built like a brick house.
He is built, but none of that is helping his stat line. And is not.
He's throwing it all at the wall. He's like, if I get more katanas, will my power go up? And the answer seems to be no.
It's kind of. Well, let's do the math here. Maybe the 1/1 is coming from, his poleaxe
cape.
Yeah, 1 power from the poleaxe, 1 toughness from the cape.
Okay.
And then he gets a little bit of extra when he's fighting a creature. His Bushido too. He gets a little extra from all these other swords.
3 swords equals 2 Bushido. Got it.
We're not here to do samurai math. But
no,
it works out.
If we're not, who is?
That's a pretty good point.
I feel like we're on like the art cast today. What do you think of the card? I think the playability here is not amazing, but it's kind of okay. Like he gets blocked as a 3/3, so he's not going to get blocked. Admittedly, what results from that is your opponent just takes 1 until they have a way to deal with him. So maybe that's not that great.
Yeah, I kind of have a weird soft spot for this card. So back in the old days, like one of the main decks that I wanted to put together in Kamigawa was a samurai deck, and I wanted it to be white and red because red kind of has like just enough of these Ronin to sort of tempt you into thinking about it.
Just enough to trick you.
Just enough to trick you. And some of them are, I'm not saying Battle Mad Ronin fits into this category, but some of them are kind of decent. And it makes you think.
Yeah, like Godo, we'll talk about later.
Like Godo.
Pretty solid.
It's exciting. You look at Godo and you're like, yeah, I want to put that in my cool samurai deck with all these legendary weapons and everything. So it is just enough to trick you. And Battle Mad Ronin definitely tricked me because he fits right into that 2-cost slot of the deck. It seems like he should work. But then you look at what other samurai fall into that 2-cost slot, and you realize that Battle Mad Ronin is competing with Kanda's Hatamoto, Samurai of the Pale Curtain, Sensei Golden Tail, and Hand of Honor, who's sort of a samurai knight that we'll see coming up. So he's competing with all of those in white, and that really makes you think twice about playing a white-red samurai deck.
Yeah, the brutal part about that list is I feel like you don't even need to reach the like Samurai of the Pale Curtain, Sensei Golden Tail level. Like just thinking about Kanda's Hatamoto, I would take the Hatamoto every time over this guy.
Absolutely.
And that's not exactly an S tier card. It's just looks pretty good compared to the Battle Mad Ronin. Although the Battle Mad Ronin would win in a fight.
That's very true. Maybe Kanda's Hatamoto was his captain.
Oh boy. Whew,
heavy. We're really diving into the lore and the art on this episode because the cards themselves just have so little for us.
We got to lead on something for material.
Exactly.
I think you should write a fanfic about Battle Mad Ronin, Connor.
His backstory.
Like what happened? Yeah, what happened?
Yeah, what happened there?
Why does he have 4 weapons? Where does he store his other provisions?
They're all in the cave.
I was going to say it on Akki Avalanchers and I forgot, so I'll say it here because it applies here too. I like how mountainous these red cards are. Like I think Wizards, probably for good reason, has kind of moved away from like red cards are on mountains, white cards are in fields of grass because it's artistically limiting. But I feel like some old school kind of warm and fuzzies looking at like, look at these kind of John Avon-y mountains in the background of this guy. He's definitely a red creature, and I kind of like that.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely in the mountains here, but at the same time, I feel like, and I think we'll see this more as we go through the color, it feels like the flavor game is a little bit weaker in red compared to the other colors that we've seen.
God, the red just gets in the shorts everywhere.
It really does. Like black has all of these, really cool, iconic spirits and Oni, and, it's this very sinister, powerful color. White has these noble samurai and the kitsune that have this, really unique, cool design. Blue has a Soratami and also some really freaky spirits to look at. And red sort of feels like it's, just there. Like the Akki are cute, but they all kind of look the same. And then I guess there's some humans and some ogres wandering around in the mountains too.
It's kind of leftovers. That's interesting. I mean, I like the Akki quite a lot, but it's an interesting point of it does have to share a lot of the rest of its real estate with other colors.
Yeah.
I have it at a meh 3x just because I don't know why I'm including so many of these bad cards, but I just feel like we're going to need some 2-drops and it might as well be him.
I also landed on Meh with 2 copies, like as just a
That feels more correct.
As just like a 2-mana option for red, this honestly still seems pretty bad. It's like basically just a ping for 1 every turn until your opponent has something big enough to block him, and then they're just going to block and kill him. And until then, they're just going to ignore him, which they can because he only has 1 power toughness.
Yeah, you know what that's making me think about actually is our buddy Devoted Retainer, Sickle Dub, 1/1, Bushido 1. And the thing about that card is he looks kind of okay. It's like, okay, he comes down on 1. Bushido 1 means, your opponent can't just like trade, da-da-da-da-da. But then when you actually play him, what really happens with Devoted Retainer is he connects for between 2 to 4 damage, and then he doesn't do anything for the rest of the game. And in this case, it's even worse because once this guy gets outclassed, he, foolishly charges into battle. So yeah, now we're talking about it. I kind of feel like if this guy's a worse Devoted Retainer, that's not very good.
That's pretty low. Well, like Devoted Retainer, you chip in for 1 for a few turns, and then he hangs out and probably eventually becomes a chump blocker. But this guy can't even do that. He becomes a chump attacker.
Your Mad 2 seems fine. I think you're right. We don't want too much of this.
Yeah, I think that's probably where we want to be for now.
Probably somewhere between correct and still too generous, to be honest. Okay, well, let's talk about a card that challenges your notion that Red's flavor is weak because it's an absolute home run. Ben Akki Hermit. 2 RR for a 1/1 legendary Goblin Shaman. Tap. Ben deals damage to target attacking creature equal to the number of untapped mountains you control. So I feel like we need to divorce our conversation about this card into 2 parts. One is about his cute name and his flavor and the backstory in his flavor text and the cute squid on his head and the amazing art. And then the other part is about the card, its playability. So where do you want to go first?
Let's talk about the card so we can end on a high note.
Okay, so I think the card here is really quite bad and actually maybe worse than it looks. So, which is saying something for a 4-mana 1/1. I think the problem with this card is that your opponent can play around it pretty easily and actually kind of gets the best of it. So he can only hit attacking creatures, and the damage is equal to untapped mountains. And so basically what that says to me is you play Ben. Well, your opponent ignores him for the first turn because he has summoning sickness. And then after that, if you want to mess with their combat, you need to leave mountains open. So you're not using your mana, and then it goes to your opponent's turn, and they just go, okay, I won't attack, I'll just cast a threat, and then it goes back to you. And then, your opponent is just snowballing while you're sitting here dirtling with this hermit until they overwhelm you. Like, I don't really see how this can do what it seems to threaten it to do.
Now that you've spelled it all out that way, it kind of feels like it would be really unfun to play with, too. Like, as the opponent, you just don't really care what Ben's doing one way or the other. But as the person actually playing Ben, you get him out, and then, it gets to the next turn, you've got these untapped mountains, and now you have to think, all right, is this going to be the turn that my opponent attacks? If so, I got to keep all these mountains open, which means I'm not playing anything, or not playing anything meaningful, probably. And I'm just sitting on these mountains, wondering if they're going to attack. And then the opponent has all of the agency there.
Right, because you didn't get to cast your spells, and
yeah, it's just not fun.
Yeah, and you're not set up that well to play at instant speed. Red has some okay kind of instant speed damage spells, but apart from that, you're not really set up to take advantage of this of end of turn, I blah. It doesn't really work that way.
Honestly, if you're in multiple colors, you may not even have enough mountains for it to matter.
It's hard for me to understand why Ben had to be a 1/1. Honestly, I feel like he could be a 2/2 or a 2/3 or an 0/4 or any number of other stat lines, and he still would not have been OP. He would have been fine.
Yeah, it's pretty baffling to me how defensively oriented Red seems to be.
It's so alien feeling.
It is. It doesn't fit into what we're accustomed to Red doing. Even when a card is clearly meant to be defensive, like Ben, he's not set up for it. He doesn't have the stat line to, survive anything, to be able to keep the threat of this ability up. The defensiveness just overall in Red doesn't even really feel very intentional, because Red still has a lot of spells that are focused on attacking, a lot of creatures that are focused on attacking, like Battle Mad Ronin, or the trigger off of damaging players. So it's just in this really weird space where a lot of cards are better on defense, but it's still thematically feels like it's pushing toward attack, attack, attack.
It's such a great point. Okay, so I think I think that takes us to Instacut, right?
I think so. Let's Instacut and then circle back for the good parts of Ben Ben.
Okay, yeah, this I'm excited to talk about. So go pull up the art if you're not looking at it because it's delightful. So Ben Ben is a kind of hunchbacked Akki hermit in a cave somewhere. I think examining some carvings on a wall or something, and he's lit by a single flickering wax candle. And he's sort of looking in a startled way at the viewer, and he has a green squid, like baby squid on his head for no apparent reason.
And it's adorable.
And it's a super cute squid, and he's kind of cute too because he looks kind of scared. You kind of want to give him a hug.
The way that it's lit, it looks like he's sort of at the end of a tunnel or something. He's just been discovered.
Yes.
And like he looks freaked out. He doesn't want to be found.
And it's some great lighting work on here, like the shadow that he's casting and the kind of bright, warm yellows and then varying degrees of shadow. It's really an incredible like piece for an analog painting. Greg Staples really poured his heart into this thing, I think. I love the little graffitos. They're these kind of like, I don't know. They're like these little bullet head guys. They look like grinning faces for some reason. I don't know if Ben Ben's discovering these or he creates them himself or what his deal is, but he's got this kind of quirky outside. He's kind of an outsider artist, you know?
Yeah, he's kind of a rebel. You know, actually, those look like something you would see in like the background of Super Mario World.
That's what I was thinking.
The little
they look
hills.
like hills, and yeah, they're Mario hills. They totally are.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to know how any of this amounts to tapping to deal damage equal to untap mounts, to be honest. Ben Ben doesn't look like he wants to deal any damage. He looks like kind of a nice, gentle, shy guy.
Well, I think the flavor text kind of shed some light on that.
Yeah, you want to read it? I love this flavor text.
Yeah, so it says, some Akki thought of Ben Ben as a kami of trickery in disguise. They hunted for him in the maze of warrens, often falling prey to his traps. So the mountains are his traps.
That's great.
They're trying to get him, and he's using his traps and his maze and his trickery to stay alone.
All right. If we're rating on art, art and flavor, this would be an auto include, but alas, we have to think about playability too, and I don't think this gets there.
Sorry, Ben Ben.
He does command 63 decks on EDH Rec, which is, honestly not that many, but it's like 61 more than I expected. I didn't expect him to run any decks, and it must be just based on how cute he is.
Yeah.
Although he is kind of cute with things like Basilisk Collar or other things that trigger off damage. So kind of fun.
Yeah.
Leaving your lands untapped.
I think we all do.
All right.
Bye-bye, Ben Ben. Let's go to I think a considerably stronger card in Blind with Anger. Oh, here we go. So this is 3R for an arcane instant, or instant arcane. It says, untap target non-legendary creature and gain control of it until end of turn. That creature gains haste until end of turn. So Blind with Anger lets you take control of your opponent's creature and attack with it if you want, or because it's an instant, you can block another attacking creature of your opponent if you want to. I feel like this is a pretty strong way to kind of turn the tables and get back into a game. And because it's only one designated, it's like pretty easy to splash into red for this. And it's arcane. So why do you hate it?
Because threaten effects should cost 3 mana, not 4.
But this is arcane.
Yes, it is arcane. So I kind of like Kiku Knight's Flower sent me into a like Rage spreadsheet. This did too. I had to build it manually, but I built a spreadsheet of every threaten effect in the game in red. There are 61 threaten effects in red. I'll link this important analysis from the show notes. Of those, I would consider only 3 to 5 of those 61 cards worse than this card. Those are, for those keep following along at home, Flash Conscription, which is an unbelievably bad threaten effect from Ravnica that costs 6 mana.
I had that in a white-red deck.
I know. We all did. It was back in those days when it's like Wizards wouldn't print cards that are just completely useless, right? Surely.
that really is how we, thought of the game back then when we're like 12, 13.
How did we get through Kamigawa block to Ravnica block without realizing that not all cards have a place?
It's all we knew. This is, we didn't have some like modern black and red vampire deck to compare against. It was just this.
Yeah, we were like, Ben Akki Hermit must be good, and I must be dumb for not seeing how he's good.
I mean, he wouldn't be rare if he wasn't good.
Exactly. They wouldn't make this guy rare, surely.
And he was rare, by the way.
Okay, anyway, so Blind with Anger. Most threaten effects cost 3 mana. the handful that cost 4 mana generally come with some kind of big upside. Like they give +2/+0 to the creature. They have cycling. They're a modal spell that can be played as a land instead. All these other things. And so the fact that this costs 4 and doesn't really give you any extra upside is really kind of irritating to me. If you're trying to look at my inscrutable spreadsheet, by the way, folks, bold means I think it's in the same ballpark of badness, and underline means it's actually somehow worse than this card. But I really think this is one of the worst threatened effects in the game. That said, I think this is probably still okay-ish. But I have it at Med, and I see in the spreadsheet you have a different rating. What is your rating, Connor?
Well, I just got to say, it sounds like you were blinded with anger by this
Connor,
card.
I am blind with anger, and I'm even more blind with anger that I put that joke in the spreadsheet, and I forgot to say it. So thank you for reminding me.
It still landed, I'm sure.
Whew, yeah, I'm sure people are just rolling. They're blind with laughter after that one.
All right, so hopefully everyone can see again after all that. Because I gave Blind with Anger auto-include
what?
And 2 copies, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure about 1 copy versus 2. I'm maybe willing to come down to 1, but I feel like, all your comparison, all your spreadsheet threaten magic that you're doing there, what you've lost sight of is that all of those 60 some other cards are not in Kamigawa.
I knew you were going to say that.
You got to look at this in context, right? Like you got to look at this card as card in the weakest color of a weak set that has, this color has not that many cards that really have much of an impact or do much of anything. See Ben and his 4 mana 1/1 Akki friends. So like to be able to spend 4 mana to actually make a play that has or can have some game-changing impact, I think is worth it. And it's arcane on top of that in an instant. I'm honestly surprised that this isn't a sorcery in this set.
But I feel like you're glossing over one important detail, which is the words non-legendary creature. And like so many of the best things in this set, like the dragons, are legends. I feel like that downside is very, very real.
Yeah, but I mean, we still have like both of the big boy Onis from Black, Painracker and Gut-Wrencher Oni. Like those are not legendary.
Mm-hmm.
There's some solid white samurai that aren't legendary that you could get some value out of with Blind with Anger.
Yeah, so the use case of yours I like best here is the 2-for-1 of steal your creature to block your other creature. I think that is nice. I don't know that I can really go to auto-include in good conscience. I feel like I'm willing to give you a playable here, but I feel like auto-include's pretty high for this card.
All right, well, let me give you one more.
Okay.
Earthshaker, who we'll be talking about soon.
Yeah.
That's 4/5.
Yeah, that's
and if you have another spirit or arcane spell to play after this, then you just wipe the board and temporarily got an Earthshaker, and then wiped your board and gave it back to your opponent. So
yeah,
maybe you think about that.
Give you a better example, like Moss Kami or something. Yeah, there are non-legendary things that are still good.
And I feel like just like grabbing a big creature for a turn and getting in for the damage is, I think, worth 4 mana in this set.
Yeah.
But I'll agree that the non-legendary part is a major bummer in a set where legends are a central theme.
Connor has conceded the bummer.
So maybe we do need to go to playable.
Okay, I'm fine with playable. I'm actually kind of fine with your 2x. It might be wrong just because I feel like this is the kind of effect that's normally a little bit hard to come by, but I'm fine with a 2x playable, I think.
Yeah, let's do 2x playable.
I want to pitch you live on a concept, Connor, in front of the listeners.
Oh boy.
I want to propose that we do a special episode at some point in our run where we review all 24 4-mana 1/1s in red and rank them.
There's only 24 that have ever been printed?
That seems like too many to me. You think there should be even more?
No, I mean, that means that an eighth of them are in this set right here.
That's right, yes. Fully 12.5% of all the 4-mana 1/1s that exist in Magic are in the set.
Oh, wow. I do like that idea.
It includes hits like Goblin Snowman, one of my favorite cards.
Well, I mean, that's enough reason right there. If it means we can talk about Goblin Snowman.
It includes Aladdin.
And Aladdin?
Aladdin. It includes Dao-chan Artful Beauty. There's a lot of really weird cards in here that I think we would have fun with.
Yeah, I'm into that.
All right. I'll make a sticky note on that. Thank you, listeners, for bearing with us. All right, playable 2X. Okay, next up, we have Blood Rites. Blood Rites is 3 RR for an enchantment. 1 R, sack a creature, : Blood Rites deals 2 damage to any target. Oh, man. The price here is really hard to bear. I actually think there is still a place for this card, which we can talk about in a second, but there's a card from Ikoria, which is, of course, a way more powerful set, which does this exact thing, except it costs 1 red mana to cast and activates for 2 generic instead of 1 in a red. And that card is still okay. Like this card is really hard to think about next to Weaponize the Monsters or Goblin Bombardment or any number of other things that do something similar.
Yeah, it's just so expensive. I mean, 5 mana. You're paying 5 mana just to get this out as an option, and then another 2 mana every time you want to. 2 mana and sacrificing a creature every time you want the effect. So you're looking at least 7 mana for 2 damage.
The first shock is going to be a minimum of what? Basically 8 mana because you had to cast the creature.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. I actually think this still has legs, though. Some of it is because it has, a little bit of that devouring greed potential to like close out a stalled game. There's a lot of board stalls in this format. This lets you feed anything into it. And, if you sack 3 or 4 things late in the game, that might be enough to just kind of finish off your opponent. And so I think despite the truly obscene cost here, I think this card is still okay.
So where do you come down on it, impab-wise?
I had it up at a playable, which feels generous, but honestly, I think it probably is. I think I'd usually be pretty happy to have this in my deck.
Yeah, I landed on a meh. I think you're right that it does have some legs. It's got some potential in, super grindy game. We've had a few big stalemates in our test games where we both have multiple creatures out, but no one is really able to create a board state that like breaks through to finish things off, and Blood Rites would be pretty nice to have in that situation where you can just sack everything and end the game right there. So this is like a real option to close out that game, but it's 5 mana and 2 of those are like have to be red just to set up the Blood Rites, and then it's sitting there. Your opponent knows it's coming, which is a pretty big contrast from Devouring Greed.
Yeah, I feel like this would be pretty fair, honestly, if it just cost no mana to activate or a single red to activate. I don't really know why they felt the need to make this so expensive.
Yeah, I mean, if it costs like 2 or 3 mana to put this out, then I feel pretty good about it. But I think costing 5 for no immediate benefit, like that can't go higher than a meh for me.
Yeah, can I just further twist the knife on this thing? If you just compare it to another card with the same casting cost and basically the same ability, Siege Gang Commander, like this card feels like really bad, right? Siege Gang Commander, of course, is 5 mana for a 2/2 that brings along 3 goblin tokens, and yeah, it can only sacrifice goblins, but this thing looks really, really painful next to Siege Gang Commander. Yeah, I think you're right that it's a meh. I do think it's likely to make the final cut, though. I think it does something at least kind of interesting.
It's a card that I probably would want to draw later in a game, so there's that. Yeah. A card you might want to draw later in the game.
That's Blood Rites.
All right, I'm pretty excited for this next one. We've got Brothers Yamazaki. 2R for a 2/1 legendary human samurai with Bushido 1. If there are exactly 2 permanents named Brothers Yamazaki in play, the legend rule doesn't apply to them. Each other creature named Brothers Yamazaki gets +2/+2 and has haste. So first off, I think that as a brothers-oriented podcast, we really need to give extra consideration to these cards.
Yes, I agree.
But I love these. They like the design of it and the text. Like, if there are exactly 2 permanents named this in play, the legend rule in quotes doesn't apply to them. Like, it has this real custom magic, just weird card fun to it that we don't really have anywhere else in Red.
Yeah, this is honestly one of my favorite cards from the entire block. This card just made a huge impression on me back in the day. I think because it is quirky, right? It's an uncommon legend, which was not something you saw a lot of back then. And then it has this weird, reference to the legend rule, which this must be one of like 3 cards in the whole game that uses the words legend rule on it. And, the reason it breaks the rules is so kind of clever. Like, it tickles your brain. They could have had, these have 2 different names. There could have been like, Joe Yamazaki and Bob Yamazaki or something.
The famous Bob Yamazaki.
Yeah, Bob and Joe.
The famous warrior.
Sounds like 2 brothers who would own like a pair of restaurants or convenience stores in Hawaii or something.
Yeah, or like a plant nursery.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yes. Okay. That got very vivid very quickly. Yeah. I don't know. This card really tickles my brain. And I think it's also reasonably good. Like 3 mana, 2/1 with Bushido 1 isn't amazing. It's like very, very slightly better than a Grey Ogre, but it's not totally indefensible. And if you get 2, these things are genuinely pretty boss. Like 3 mana 4/3s with Bushido 1 and haste. That's great.
I mean, like when you activate Brother Zord here and you get them both out, like that is godlike power.
Couple of other notes on this. This got reprinted on the list, the thing where in collectors and set boosters, you'll get kind of a random card from an old set sometimes, but they only printed 1 of these. So there's 2 of these with 2 different art, and only the A version got reprinted in the list, not the B version. I just think that's unconscionable, and Wizards of the Coast are cowards, and they need to print B on the list. I think that's completely messed up.
Yeah, actually, I sort of glossed over that when I was introducing this card, but it is one of, or maybe the only card, certainly the only card I know of in Magic, where there are 2 different printings of the same card that have, the text is exactly the same, but there's an A and a B version with different art on each of them.
Well, so there was a brief period in like Homelands and I think the Dark where they decided that unique art was a real selling point. And so they would do like 4 versions of art for terrible Homelands cards that no one wanted.
That's so sad.
In the same time, go look this up. It's really amazing to see all these utterly unplayable Homelands cards with like 4 unique arts. Like the what are those? Like the Homerids. Like almost every Homerid has like 3 unique arts. As though anyone ever. I know, right?
That's such terrible company for these brothers.
But yeah, it's a lot cooler here. And actually, if you look really closely, like at the bottom, it says the collector's number, and it says 160A in very tiny type. And 160B, which I think is cool.
Coming into Magic right around the time of Kamigawa, we both started playing kind of at the tail end of Onslaught, and then
as brothers,
and then dabbled in Mirrodin a bit. But Kamigawa was really the first set that I think both of us like dove into whole hog. And you look at a couple of cards like this with this A and B version, and just these really weird effects. And as a new player to the game, it really makes you think about like how many different cool cards can show up here, and how how weird and unique this game can be.
Yeah, just how huge the design space for Magic really is. The fact that they've done this and they've never even needed to revisit it. They just did it once and it was cool and unique. And I'm kind of surprised they haven't done another one of these. These did get a really cute callback in Neon Dynasty Kamigawa. There's 2 sisters Yamazaki cards that each have kind of symmetrical effects. They don't have the same name. One of them gets artifacts back from the graveyard and the other gets enchantments. But I love that they gave a callback to these cards because these really are some of my faves.
Yeah, that's really fun.
Before we get to numbers, I want to decide 2 things with you. So one is, which of these brothers do you think best represents each of us?
Oh boy. Well, I think we need to describe them first.
They're fairly similar.
There's not a lot to describe.
I'm going to let you take that one.
Okay, so Brother A is facing stage right, dual wielding some big kind of serrated swords. They're not katanas, which is a little weird. They're like these big serrated straight swords. He's got another sword in his belt just in case.
There's a lot of swords going on in these Red Samurai.
You need them. He's wearing a lot of armor. He's sort of, his build is a lot like Battle Mad Ronin. Like they really bulk up in the mountains here.
He's basically got enough armor, and then he's got an armadillo cloak on top of it just in case.
Yeah, and some fur in there too.
Yeah, there is fur. I like that. There's a lot of fur going on.
Lots of fur. I mean, it gets cold there,
Yep.
He's got a pretty cool looking Kabuto helmet. I think Kabuto is literally helmet in Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
With these big horns.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's Pretty cool looking guy. So Brother B is facing stage left. So there's your first twist. And he's wielding a halberd instead of dual wielding swords. But he also has a sword in his belt because you got to do that.
And they form a panorama. Yeah, they're like blocking your way. They're like, you're not getting through.
You're not getting past both of us brothers.
Mm-hmm. Brother
B's helmet is a little different. He sort of has like more of a ram's horn style to the horns on his Kabuto. And that's all I got to say on that.
So do you identify more strongly with A or B?
I kind of lean toward B because I like his helmet better.
He's got a better helmet, and he's got a poleaxe, and I think you like that. His weapon looks very European, incidentally. It does. I don't know that Japan uses those kind of weapons.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you said that because I see myself as a Brother A because I don't know why. Because he's sharpening his sword or kind of sharpening his sword, and it makes me think of cooking, and I like cooking. I don't know. I'm not sure if this is quite a connection content. You're making. You know, as I get into this segment, I'm not sure this is as interesting as I hoped.
I mean, I'm having fun. Maybe do you think that subconsciously there's a little bit of a brother alpha, brother beta thing?
Oh wow,
happening here, where you assume that because you're the older one, you must be I'm the brother A.
Whoa. Yeah, well, I feel kind of protective of you. You know, you got your impressive but delicate ram horns on you, and I feel like I gotta help protect you from the world.
Even though we're statistically identical.
We're statistically identical.
All right, yeah, I think this is fine.
Okay, that does get into a kind of funny thing about these, which is if your opponent has a Brothers Yamazaki, they see that too. And so they become the perfect counter to one another. That plays differently today than it would have back then. So back in the day, the legend rule applied on both sides of the table. So if I play a legend with the same name as your legend, they can't coexist. Whereas today it's unique to one side of the table, which leads to some kind of funniness with the Yamazaki brothers. I don't think they play quite like they were supposed to.
Well, in a way, they maybe play a little more like, what looks like their intended purpose because, back in Kamigawa rules, there could be a brother on each side of the battlefield, and that would be the limit to the number of brothers out there.
Which makes lore sense.
But like, I don't know. It feels like each player's side of the battlefield, at least in my mind, is sort of its unique space. I don't know.
Yep. Yeah, I'm fine with that. It is funny to think of up to 4 brothers Yamazaki facing off.
Yes. I mean, there's no limit. There could be a lot of brothers out there. We don't know.
Okay, so one more bit of trivia before we talk about how many of these to include. They command 41 decks on EDH Rec, which is not a lot, but again, is a lot more than I would have thought.
Well, I mean, how does that work? Do you have one brother in the command zone and one in your deck?
I hope people let you just put them both in the command zone, like the partner mechanic or something. Like if someone shows up with a Brothers Yamazaki commander deck, they deserve some concessions for the rest of the table.
Let them have both brothers.
Yes. Okay, so how many of these do you want? So I have these as an auto-include, not because I think they're so insanely powerful, but because they are one of my most favorite cards in the whole set. And I kind of want 2 of each, which might be like way too many, but it's at least where I want to start because I want a decent chance of 2 brothers showing up.
Yeah, same here. I want 2 of each version, so 4 in total, to really push the brothers. And if there are 4, this opens up the possibility of that third brother showing up and really just throwing everything off.
Just throwing the whole battle into chaos.
The whole balance of brothers. Because just as a reminder, the text does say if there are exactly 2 permanents named Brothers Yamazaki in play, the legend rule doesn't apply to them. So if you bring a third brother in...
Oh my God, I hadn't thought of that. That's so weird.
The legend rule applies again as soon as Brother 3 shows up.
That's so strange. So in that case, each of you will get to keep 1 brother? Oh, that's so weird. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. So
okay, I love that. Boy, is that bizarre.
I want the possibility of that. So I think 2 of each for a total of 4.
Wow, that is so weird and awkward. Okay, great. Yeah, let's include 4 total.
All right.
Brutal Deceiver. Our least favorite. I think we're on record that these are our least favorite cycle in the block, right?
Yeah.
All right. Brutal Deceiver. 2 and R for a 2/2 spirit. 1. Look at the top card of your library. 2. Reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, Brutal Deceiver gets +1/+0 and gains first strike until end of turn. Play this ability only once each turn. I feel like for the first time ever, I accidentally read a card kind of sarcastically there because I really, really hate this cycle. And this is yet another one that I hate. So what do we have here? We have a 3-mana 2/2 that for 3 mana can sometimes become a 3/2 with First Strike. That's not very good. The thing I actually resent most about this versus the really bad Deceivers is that this is almost on the border of playable, but that makes me kind of hate it all the more because it's just such an awful thing to have to do, to spend 3 mana to sometimes get First Strike, like, and then you can only do it once a turn. I just hate this card, Connor.
Yeah, I said meh, but I feel deceived. Which I think also happened with Cruel Deceiver with me. So they're really getting under my skin. But yeah, like being a 3-mana 2/2 like Grey Ogre seems kind of okay at first when you're just looking at this as like, you know, card that could appear in retail limited. And then it's got this potential upside ability, definitely potential upside ability on it. And it makes you think like, oh, this could probably work sometimes. But that doesn't mean that we need to...
But only 40% of the time, it's worth noting.
Only 40% of the time. Even if it could work, even if it may be sort of playable, we just don't want these in the cube, you know?
This is where it's a cube and we're not trying to make a set cube. We're trying to create a draft environment that appeals to us. And like, these cards are a core part of Champions Limited. And I don't like them. They're not fun. They're boring. They create a thing that looks like a mini game, but actually isn't, because there's no interaction with your opponent. There's no real interesting decision to make. I don't know. This card is just, to me, it's just bad. And like, I don't know. We have plenty of other 3-drops. Like, I would rather have more Brothers Yamazaki than any of this.
Well, we'll have plenty of those.
Maybe we just have 12 Brothers Yamazaki.
Maybe we need to double down.
All right. Can we cut this card?
Yeah, we can cut that. Just one more thing to add. I think that is like a really good point, that this is kind of playable in just a typical limited format. But, you know, within the cube, we're not just trying to build something that we like, but also, you know, trying to put together a set of cards that captures like the best, the most iconic, the most fun things about Kamigawa. And Brutal Deceiver may be technically playable just in terms of stats and potential upside, but does nothing to capture any of that magic.
That's such a good way to put it, because I think if I were to go poll like 100 people and say, what are your top 10 cards of, well, actually it wouldn't matter whether I said top 10 cards of Kamigawa block, top 10 cards of Kamigawa champions, top 10 red cards of champions, or even top 10 like 3-drops. Like, no one is naming any of these cards because they're just not, they weren't a success, you know. And I think Morrow has said this, like, these cards were intended to do some things. They didn't actually play that well. No one remembers them fondly. And that's fine. Sometimes, you know, Wizards print cards that don't land. That's fine.
Yep. And they don't have to land in the cube either.
Here.
Let's move on to an interesting one. Crushing Pain. 1R for an instant arcane. Crushing Pain deals 6 damage to a target creature that was dealt damage this turn. I kind of think that this maybe has some legs. It's arcane, so you get a point for that. It's cheap and not double designated. Another point in my book. And it can kill almost everything in the set if you can manage to do a little bit of damage to it, which you can do with a chump block, you can do with, you know, Frostwielder or Kumano, or any number of just little ping effects. So I feel like this is like actually kind of decent removal for red.
This does not have legs, in my view.
Not at all?
No, I think the Oracle text here should read like, Crushing Pain deals 6 damage to target creature that was dealt damage this turn. Then it 2-for-1s you. Like, this is essentially guaranteed, outside of a pinging effect, to be that you 2-for-1 yourself. And I don't think that's good enough. I just think that's really poor. I do think it's good enough. I still have it as a meh, actually. But I do think this card is quite bad. I think it's almost always going to be a 2-for-1, and that's pretty rough. Okay,
how would you feel about an arcane instant that for 2 mana gives target blocking creature +6/+0?
Target blocking creature +6/+0. I think that was pretty bad, honestly.
Well, now that I'm saying it that way, I was comparing it to what was that white card? Hold the Line.
Yeah,
and it seems pretty bad compared to that. But I mean, like, when you look at the options that red actually has, in this set, like, what are the other removal options aside from, you know, Glacial Ray, which is obviously miles above almost every other card in red?
You know, it is pretty thin on the ground. I don't have a list handy, but I there's not a ton of great red removal.
So I see you still gave it a meh, though, not an instacut.
Yeah, and I think it's for the reasons you just said. Like, it's not very good, but there's not a lot of competition, and it does at least remove most everything, albeit at a pretty painful cost. I'm just scrolling here, and there's not really that much. There's Torrent of Stone, which I think is borderline tolerable coming up in Betrayers. Spiraling Embers is maybe okay. Yamabushi's Flame coming up later in the set, I think, is actually quite solid. But you're right, there's not a ton, for sure. Yeah, I'm fine with meh. I don't know that I agree on your 2x. I feel like we're being too generous.
You think just one of I just feel like one of these is weird.
Yeah, all right, fine. There can be two. Let's talk about the art.
This card, I think, just barely gets there power-wise. The art does not get there at all for me. Like, this guy, this Ronin, is not suffering crushing pain. He's having these weird bird bug blood cells injected into his arm, and he kind of seems fine with it.
I feel like if anything, he's kind of smiling.
Yeah.
I kind of look at them as like those little suit devils from Spirited Away or something. Like, I kind of feel like they're helping him out. They really don't look like they're dealing 6 damage to him, that's for sure.
Maybe this was a healing oriented card. Mm-hmm. The art was made for something healing oriented.
And then they just changed all the white to red in Photoshop.
They changed all the white to red. Yeah, I mean, it looks like his arm is maybe bleeding a little bit, which, I mean, that's painful, but not really crushing.
Yeah, it's more like irritating pain.
Yeah, it's like a bad itch.
Yeah, bad itch. That would be a good name for like a burn spell. Or that's more like a black spell.
Yeah,
as we discovered last time.
It does look like he's just kind of scratching his arm and going, oh boy, there it is again.
Sure, we can put 2 of them in.
That's crushing pain.
Desperate Ritual. 1 and a red for an arcane instant. Splice onto arcane for 1 and a red. I found this card really hard to evaluate. It's inarguably one of the most iconic cards in the set. It is the 3rd most cubed red spell in the set after Kiki-Jiki and Through the Breach.
Wow.
It shows up a ton in Vintage Cube. It shows up in other kind of storm-oriented environments. I do feel like it's probably still not good. Like, there's just nothing to do with any of your mana in this set. Or not nothing, but this is just not a set where you want to go down on cards to gain marginal mana advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is, there's just nothing to storm into. There's no big payoff for, building up all of this mana, even assuming you are able to do all the splicing you want to do to like ramp up this mana. What are you going to do with it? It's, it's all red. Like, that really limits the big threats you can get out with this.
Yeah, and sometimes, like, I have Dark Ritual in my main cube. Honestly, I'm still not sure it's good, but I have Dark Ritual in my main cube, despite having no kind of stormy combo archetypes, just because I like the ability to, power out a 3-drop on turn 1. But that's really a different scenario than powering out a 3-drop on turn 2. Like, you're not really powering it out at that point. You're just like, haha, I gained a slight edge. Like, I don't know if this has a place.
Yeah. And I do really have a soft spot for these red ritual spells. I love the idea of just this fountain of red mana, this magic red juice, but I just can't see this being relevant anywhere. Like, with the best case scenario of you splicing, you're getting 1 extra red mana, and then maybe you can do that again if you really have a lot of arcane spells to splice onto, and then what, you play Ben?
Yeah, that's exactly what you do.
That is what you do with mana.
Yeah, when I was rating, I was like, can I call this a build around 4X? And like I did in the spreadsheet, but honestly, I don't believe what I'm selling here. I think I was hoping that when I looked at your column, you'd have said something beside Instacut, but I think you're right. I think this is an Instacut.
Yeah. Yeah, I do want to say, I think this would be a lot more interesting and fun. Like you said, this card is iconic and relevant in non-full Kamigawa cubes, but I think it would be a lot more interesting for our purposes if the splice cost was colorless, which would let you kind of splash into red without actually having any mountains. But I think that would probably push the design boundaries a little further than Wizards was willing to go here.
Yeah, I think that would push a lot of boundaries, to be honest. Now you have me flirting with, like, could they print a Desperate Ritual that splices onto instants, not onto arcane? I think the answer is probably no. I think that would be really stupid, but I'm enjoying playing with it in my head. Yeah, I think this is just an Instacut, unfortunately, which really hurts. This is an absolutely iconic card.
Yeah, we'll have to say goodbye.
Connor, does that make you a little bit angry?
Makes me desperate, and honestly, it fills me with a devouring rage.
Oh no.
Which costs 4R and is an instant arcane. And as an additional cost to play that, I or you may sacrifice any number of spirits. Target creature gets +3/+0 until end of turn. For each spirit sacrificed this way, they get an additional +3/+0 until end of turn. So this is no Devouring Greed.
No.
Which is, of course, its sister card in black.
It's Hungry Cousin.
It's Hungry Cousin. This is the Angry Cousin. Or I guess black would be the Greedy Cousin. There's maybe some potential here, I think, as like a splash card in a heavy spirit deck, if you're already going in that direction. But it's just so much harder, I think, for this to have a meaningful impact and for it to even land and do what you want it to do as compared to Devouring Greed. Because it doesn't give trample, it doesn't give haste. It leaves you super, super vulnerable to removal, unlike Devouring Greed.
Yeah, that's the real gotcha on this card, but keep going.
Yeah, so it's just really, it's an all or nothing kind of card. Like either this wins you the game, because I can't see paying 5 mana for this and sacrificing all your spirits to like trade. You're either trying to win the game on the turn that you play this, or it's all going to backfire and you pretty much lose.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? I think the power here is pretty real. So I don't know, you swing in, your creature goes unblocked, you sack 3 spirits, and you give your creature +12/+0. I mean, that's game-ending power right there. I mean, you can easily knock your opponent out of the game with this thing. I do worry a little bit. Does that create unfun play patterns? Like, I feel like it's not fun to randomly die to a +12/+0. But also, as you were saying, as the caster, the risk here is really high. Like, obviously counter magic, but the real risk, as you're saying, is removal. You cast this, you sack your board, your opponent goes, great, red spirit, and you go, oh, okay, I guess I just die. I mean, I guess maybe this like either wins you or loses the game, but at least the game's over. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't even have to be Ren Spirit because this only gives plus power. It doesn't give any toughness.
If this was +3/+1, I think it'd be a different conversation.
Yeah, and like we've seen so many low toughness creatures, so many X1s. There's a good chance you're going to be playing this on Scuttling Death or something like that.
There was a cute story I found on Reddit from a few years ago. People talked about Kamigawa Limited, and somebody said, I top 8'd a GP with the green-blue deck, splashing a single red card, Devouring Rage. And with dozens of people crowded around watching, I took down a major pro at the time for the win with it in Game 3 of the last round of the Swiss. Best combat trick I played in my life. And that kind of bumped me up, honestly, reading it, because I was like, yeah, that's the kind of moment I imagine this creates. It is the kind of card that creates stories when you walk away from the table.
Yeah.
And I think there's some value to that. There's some value in like, oh yeah, you remember when I really got you with that? That was pretty funny.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is worth trying at least one copy of this.
Yeah, I'm with you on one. I have it as a playable because honestly, I think the power is here, but I'm with you on one. I don't think you want or need multiples of these running around.
Yeah. Okay, I'm willing to come up to playable.
Woo! All right, let's go to Earthshaker. Earthshaker is a 4/RR for a 4/5 spirit. Whenever you play a spirit or arcane spell, Earthshaker deals 2 damage to each creature without flying. This is a weird one. It's weird for a bunch of reasons. It's weird because it's big in a way that red generally isn't. It's weird because it kind of makes me think, does this go into some kind of like Rakdos, Knight of Souls Betrayal, Oops All Removal kind of deck? I don't know if that's a thing, but it sounds like the kind of thing I would enjoy.
Yeah.
The body here isn't great, but it's not embarrassing. Like a 4/5 can go tussle with things. I don't know. I kind of came down on this thing's pretty decent. I do think the not hitting flying thing is pretty brutal. I know that that's common for red, from Earthquake forward. But honestly, I feel like for 6 mana, this could have hit flyers and it would have been a more fun card.
They would have had to change the name, though, because it is specifically an Earthshaker.
Yeah, call it Earth and Atmosphere Shaker.
Yeah, Earth plus Sky Shaker.
We'll workshop the name.
Well, yeah, we'll get back to you on that in a future episode. I think a 6 mana 5 or 6 mana 4/5. I wanted it to be a 5/5.
If only.
It's kind of a decent raid in Kamigawa. It is a spirit, and it has like a really meaningful spirit craft trigger that can win you games. There's a good chance this is going to clear out most of your opponent's board with just one spirit craft trigger, given how small everything is.
Possibly most of your board.
Yeah, possibly most of your board, but you still got an Earthshaker after that. One of our listeners left a comment on Reddit. This was Tap Tap, giving Earthshaker as kind of an example of the sort of bigger creature card that red sort of leans into in the block. We've seen so far how bad the small creatures have been. All of these 4-mana Akki and just really all the small creatures we've looked at and probably will be looking at in red are just not good. Like the aggro is just not there for red. The early game's just not really there. So What red does have is a few kind of bigger, beefier creatures like Earthshaker, Godo, like some ogres that we're going to see later that, maybe do kind of a better job of holding the mid game.
Yeah, that makes me think maybe we've even been too generous to cards like Akki Avalanchers or Battle Mad Ronin, and like maybe we do try to position red as kind of a mid-range, control-y, keep the board clear kind of color that can, the other thing is actually maybe the without flying thing here is not all bad. Like maybe this goes into a red, blue Spirit Craft deck with flyers and Earthshaker and a bunch of arcane spells. That would be a lot of fun.
That's kind of interesting. And blue has the arcane to make that work.
Yeah, and red does too. I mean, Glacial Ray, there's a handful of other, but like red is kind of probably the other big arcane color.
Mm-hmm.
So I have this as a playable 1x, but I'm now kind of thinking of going up. If it's like maybe that's a whole like an archetype we try to steer people into.
Yeah, I had it as playable 2x just because I like it. But
yeah, I like that better.
I like the idea of this kind of having a bit of an archetype. Well, does that mean it should be a build around?
Oh yes, I like that. Build around 2x.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. I like that.
Nice. Okay, this is a bit of a callback here. We've got Ember-Fist Zubera coming up next. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail here since we did a whole Zubera special in episode 3. Be sure to check that out if you like Zuberas at all. So I'll just read out what this guy does and let you know how we rated him. Ember-Fist Zubera is 1R for a 1/2 Zubera Spirit. When it's put into a graveyard from play, it deals damage to target creature or player equal to the number of Zubera put into all graveyards from play this turn. So go listen to the Zubera episode to hear our in-depth thoughts on this guy. But we did rate him as playable with 2 copies.
Yeah, and if anything, I think my estimation is rising. Like I would rather have 3 of these, I think, and less Battle Mad Ronins as an example.
Now that we've looked at a few other cards in red, Ember-Fist Zubera is starting to look pretty good.
He's looking like a pretty good guy. But yeah, I think we can keep him at playable 2x for now and tune him up if we need it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Frostwielder. Frostwielder is 2 RR for a 1/2 human shaman. I guess, hey, at least it's not a 1/1. Tap, Frostwielder deals 1 damage to any target. If a creature dealt damage by Frostwielder this turn would die, exile it instead. So it's basically Tim, the classic 3 mana tap, ping a thing for 1 more R, and in exchange you get +1 toughness and a slightly useful exile ability. I don't think this card is indefensible, but it's a long way from making my pulse race. I don't think messing with the Soul Shift's deck's plans is as good as it might seem on this card. Just because you had to pay 4 mana for the privilege, and you still need to put in some outside work to kill the spirits. Only 34 out of the 169 spirits in the block have 1 toughness. So most of the time, this is going to need some extra help to kill a thing or to kill a spirit, which is where the exile thing really matters.
Yeah, I mean, she's not a powerhouse, but I think she still kind of passes muster. Like killing and exiling a good number of spirits outright. Like 20%, it's not huge, but it's more than I would have thought before we started all of this.
I like that we both have 20% in our notes here, and you have it as a pro and I have it as a con.
I feel good about 20%. It's better than our 7 or 10% or however many red cards or 4 mana 1/1s. I think this is okay, especially when you hear me out on this. When you think about her in comparison to Devoted Retainer or Battle Mad Ronin, who we've kind of been talking about as basically just 1 damage per turn. It's a low bar.
Cost 1 and 2 mana respectively.
It's a low bar, but Frostwielder can still do what they can do, but has the option of hitting creatures instead. 20% of spirits, and there's plenty of 1 toughness mortals, so it's not like she can only target spirits.
Yeah, let me see what total percentage of things she kills. So there are 97 creatures in the block she kills out of 336 total, so that's basically 1 in 4. Yeah, that's pretty decent percentage. Yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah, I think we kind of talked about that with Knight of Souls Betrayal, just being able to remove close to a third of creatures in the set.
Well, more like slightly more than a quarter. Let's not round 27% to almost a third.
Well, this is like our 20% of spirits, same number, us coming out different ways. I'm going to round that up to almost a third.
well, we can have different opinions of what a number means. We can't have different opinions of what a number is.
This is getting a little too philosophical.
It's getting a little existential here. I'm fine including the Frostwielder. I just think it's likely to disappoint. I wish it had a little bit more upside, but I'm fine trialing her.
Yeah.
So what do you rate her as? I had her as a 1x meh.
I have her as a 2x playable. That's probably a little bit generous, at least on the playable part of it.
Yeah, I can be persuaded on the number faster than I can be persuaded on the rating.
Yeah, I feel like I land pretty much exactly in the middle with Frostwielder, like between meh and playable. So if you'll come up to 2 copies, I'll go down to a meh.
Yeah, I'll negotiate you down on the number of copies in a subsequent episode.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
What do you think of the art?
It bothers me. First, if she's a Frostwielder, why is the frost in this art just like a weird smear of white in the corner? Like the frost part of this just seems like a total afterthought.
It really does, yeah.
Standing there in this really awkward pose against basically a blank gray background with just a smear of white over her hand in the corner. This pose is just like painful to look at. She's like, what is she wielding the frost at? It's just sort of shooting out toward nothing.
Her arms are about 4 feet long.
Her arms are super long. It looks like she should be holding a bow from her pose, but she's not. And what's her right hand doing?
Yeah, it's strange. It doesn't seem to be contributing to the magic, at least not in any visible way.
No.
She also seems dressed pretty impractically for someone who's out there wielding frost magic.
She'd probably be a little bit cold.
Yeah, I don't know that I would wear a low-rise, saran wrap skirt if I was going out to frost wield magic.
Well, maybe you wouldn't, but don't speak for all of us.
All right, sorry.
I do like her mask, though. It's sort of unexplained kabuki mask kind of thing.
It's funny, I didn't really notice anything else about this art except the mask, and I almost had a note of I like the art a lot just because I like the mask. Just put a mask in it and I'm sold.
Yeah, just one mask somewhere in the art. That's why you love the Deceivers so much.
Oh yeah, exactly. That's why it's my favorite cycle.
Mm-hmm.
All right, 2x Met.
Mm-hmm. All right, get hyped for our next one. It's Glacial Ray.
Woo!
1R for an instant arcane. Glacial Ray deals 2 damage to target creature or player, and you can splice onto arcane for 1R. So here it is. One of probably the all-around strongest cards in red. Maybe the best arcane spell in the block, with just incredible splice value, sticking a shock onto any arcane spell. What more can we say? It's an auto-include for me.
Yeah, and even shocking, for 2 mana, it's not an amazing rate, but it's not a totally embarrassing rate either. This thing just does it. I think one of the challenges with this thing is it's still really good. One of the best removal spells, even if you're not playing the arcane deck. You're just happy to have 1 or 2 of these in your deck just as a way to deal with creatures.
Yeah.
The art is also banging. To me, it's one of the most iconic pieces of the block. It's pretty hard to describe, so I'd say just look it up. But if I were to try, I would say it's a purple boomerang-shaped eagle.
That's pretty good.
Emitting giant icy purple laser beams in a mountainous landscape.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. I don't know how to describe any of what's happening here.
It's freaky and it's an assemblage of parts in the way a lot of the Kami are, but in this case it's extra abstract. You can't really, it doesn't look like something that could really exist in the physical world. It really looks like this thing is kind of temporarily bursting through from the spirit world into the material world to shoot this ray, and then it's gonna yoink back out of existence.
You might be onto something. Yeah, I think this is the first really freaky looking Kami we've seen in red so far.
That's right. Red is not making a huge impression with its art, maybe overall so far. There's a lot of solid pieces, but not exceptional ones. And you're right, we're not seeing as many of the freaky Kami that we've grown used to. Although there is some freaky Kami coming up. Things like Pain Kami next episode. He's pretty darn freaky.
Yeah. So what do you think? How many of these? I assume you're also auto-include.
Oh yeah, it's an easy auto-include.
But how many do we auto-include? I want to say 4 just because I feel like we want to have these popping up a lot.
Yeah, I'm struggling with the quantity too. I think we do want a lot of them. I think one of the problems for the red drafter is, kind of like the Ren Spirit, Ren Flesh problem. Everyone else is going to want one. Yeah. It's maybe not quite as much of a obvious splash as those cards, but it's still really solid. So I kind of like your idea of 4. I had it at 3x, but 4 feels more natural to me.
Yeah, I feel like 4 is good because I want there to be a sense that there's at least some kind of reason to go into red a little bit. Maybe this isn't the first red card that comes up, so you can't you're not necessarily making the decision right away of whether to splash into red. But if you start going into red, I want you to know, as the player, that there's maybe some Glacial Rays out there for you.
Yeah.
There's some reward for going into this color.
Yeah, I'm looking to see how many Rend Fleshes and Rend Spirits we did. So we did 3 each of those, but then the flip side of that is that 6 total copies of Black's kind of core removal package.
Yeah.
So I actually like 4 for this. I'm almost tempted to break our spreadsheet and say like 5. That might be nuts, but I do think this card is, if you're playing red and you don't have Glacial Rays, then something went very wrong.
Right. Why don't we say 4 for now, and maybe we do bump it up if we want.
Yeah, I think 4 is going to become a more meaningful number over time, too. Like we've talked about, we're almost certainly including just too many cards in the cube by a wide mile. And, I don't know that Frostwielder gets busted down to 1, but it might. Other cards, like maybe we don't need 4 Brothers Yamazaki. We don't need my indefensible 1/4 Akki Avalanchers. Like a lot of other cards are going to get busted down, which will bump up the perceived number of Glacial Ray available in the pool.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, not much more to say. Somebody on Reddit, I don't think it was on one of our posts, I think it was a historical post, said, oh no, this was on Gatherer. Someone on Gatherer said, Psychic Hobo, there's no arcane spell that wouldn't benefit from a stapled on shock, which I think pretty much says it all.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on to another iconic red card. Godo, Bandit, Warlord. 5 and an R for a 3/3 legendary human barbarian. When Godo comes into play, you may search your library for an equipment card and put it into play. If you do, shuffle. Whenever Godo attacks for the first time each turn, untap it and all samurai you control. After this phase, you get an additional combat phase. I love Godo. To me, Godo is one of the most iconic cards from the block. And I also think he's actually quite powerful. Getting additional combat steps is pretty decent, but I think the real core package here is just fetching equipment. So I'm just going to assume, for point of argument, until we get to Betrayers, that we're not running Umizawa's Jite because it is so stupidly, utterly broken. But even without that, we have a lot of solid equipment. By my count, we have Konda's Banner, No Dachi, Oathkeeper, O Naginata, Ronin War Club, Tatsumasa, and of course, Tenza, Godo's Maul. Tutoring those out would have been good enough. Cheating them into play for free is, to my mind, really quite good. So I love this card. I think it's fun, and I think it's pretty powerful.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites, and this was the main temptation for me of trying to build that white-red samurai deck that Battle Mad Ronin found his way into. I love it, the equipment grabbing, but also his second ability, untapping, after a first attack, untapping him and all of your samurai and going in for another attack. Like, just the idea of being able to set that up was really exciting to me. It still is pretty exciting if you're able to pull that off. Because he's only 1 red designated, I think it is kind of realistic to just splash into a bit of red to try to, if this pops up in your white samurai draft, it wouldn't be crazy to try to get Godo in there if you have some equipment, if you have some samurai.
I like that point a lot because I am kind of worried that the red samurai are not very good from what I can tell. And so I don't think the samurai deck is typically like straight white red, but I think you're right. And like a 6-drop with a single designated, it's pretty realistic to throw a couple of mountains in and throw in a Godo and, a Glacial Ray and be pretty happy about it.
I don't know if any of the red samurai are really good enough to bother committing to going into red much further than Godo, but like if you've already picked up some good white samurai, and especially if you've picked up some equipment, like I think you're pretty happy to go for Godo.
Yeah, I think of the extra combat thing here is largely gravy. I think you're mostly playing him for the equipment, but it's a good gravy. It's like a nice kind of spicy, full flavored gravy. Weirdly, he doesn't give an additional main phase, so almost all of these you get an additional combat step cards. Give you a main phase and then a combat step and then another main phase. Whereas Godo is just like, nope, we're going straight to combat. No time to regroup. We're just getting back in there.
I mean, he's a barbarian, so he's just all about that combat.
Oh, you think it's a flavor thing?
I don't know. I didn't notice that at all.
I think it's I can't say I was the genius who noticed it either. Someone on Gather or somebody pointed it out, and I was like, that is a pretty good insight. I'm going to steal.
I do also like how covered in equipment he is in the art. If you look at him closely, he's got the maul. Tenza Godo's maul is in his right hand, and then he's got a bunch of like glaives and stuff sticking out of the back. So he really is about that equipment.
Yeah, and then in the background, there's about 43 halberds and poleaxes sticking up from, I guess, his warriors.
Yeah, those must be all the Ronins he's leading.
Yeah, that are going to get an additional combat step very soon.
They're excited.
Yeah, there's a real kind of Conan the Barbarian sort of like old school fantasy vibe to this art that I really like. You could totally see it as, the cover of like fantastic, what was it called? Weird Tales or something, one of those old time pulpy fantasy magazines.
Yeah.
He does all right on the play front too. He appears in he leads 842 decks on EDH Rec and appears in 10,000, which ain't too shabby. And he's the 6th most cubed red card. So he appears in 1,000 cubes, or about 2% of all Cube Cobra lists, which ain't too bad for 6 mana 3/3.
Yeah. He's showing up.
I assume this is an auto include for you.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think in keeping with our usual policy, he's a 1X.
Yeah, I think especially, costing as much as he does and having these pretty unique effects, I think 1X is right.
Mm-hmm. That's taken me a little bit back to our quantity question. I also think another reason we'll want to pare down quantities of other cards is to just make sure these splashy legends get their chance to show up.
Yeah. We don't necessarily want Godo drowning in a sea of spells.
Yeah, of Akki Avalanchers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the risk there is, Morrow has said, I don't know, ad nauseum, that one of the biggest mistakes of the original Kamigawa block was saying that legends were a key theme, but pretty much only having legendaries at rare. So players could open 2 or 3 packs and not really notice that legends were even a thing. I hopefully we don't maintain or make that same mistake in our cube.
Yeah. I mean, there just aren't that many cards that are not legends that care about legend. Well, I mean, even the legendaries don't care about legendary. It's just you notice that all your rare creatures are legends, and that's kind of it. There's not really any other mechanics that revolve around that.
Yeah, or you don't notice. I think this is the other thing. Like if you open 4 packs and then only 2 of them are the rarest creatures and they're both legendaries, like I think as a casual player you might just straight up miss that.
Actually, I did not know before we started this that every single rare creature in the block is legendary.
Yeah, which is a kind of cool gimmick.
Yeah, but one that you can easily overlook.
Yeah, it feels like an early attempt to do something they've got better printing technology for now. Like a lot of times now they'll do these things with collation where it's like every pack of a set with double face cards will have 1 double face card in it, or every pack of the original Dominaria set has, I think, a legendary card in it, no matter what, but that can appear across uncommon or rare. So they're able to do these kind of sophisticated printing techniques now. Or not printing, collation techniques now, but at the time I think they tried to brute force it with the rare sheet. It didn't land like they hoped.
Yeah.
I do want to correct you. There are a few cards that care about legends, right? There's a few white samurai that want to be led by a legend. There's that cycle of lands that boost legends. There's a couple.
Okay, yeah, that's true. And I guess there's a few spells that specifically focus on legends or non-legends, like Blind with Anger, or coming up later, we've got Hero's Demise, which is a removal spell that can only target a legendary creature. One last thing on Godo before we move to our next card. I just really like this big war goat that he's riding on.
Yeah,
I mean, that thing is cute.
It's so cool. I don't know if I'd go to cute. I think it's like just badass and tough looking.
Yeah, he's like if you just look at his head, he's really badass and tough. But then his body's sort of like, he kind of looks like a chubby puppy a little bit. Like he's just kind of like bulky. He's got these short little legs, like a little hard to picture him, charging ferociously into a battle.
I don't know. This whole thing kind of says like boss monster to me, which I appreciate.
Yeah, Godo just working on every level. All right, let's go on to a card that's not quite working on every level. Hanabi Blast. 1 RR for an instant. It deals 2 damage to target creature or player, and then return Hanabi Blast to its owner's hand, then discard a card at random. So you play this, you damage something, it comes back to your hand, and then you lose a random card from your hand. Maybe it's Hanabi Blast, maybe it's something else, you just don't know. And I just don't know about this card. It seems like it would be bad almost all of the time, but it also kind of seems like it might be fun to have floating around in the cube.
I had a note in here that I feel like as Wizards was designing Red, they said, those like kind of puzzle cards that are meant to challenge your skill at evaluating cards, like Struggle for Sanity in Black in this set? Like, what if every other card was like that? What if almost all of these cards were a puzzle to evaluate and looked bad, but made you think, am I missing something? Is there some way this is good? Am I a dummy? Like I think actually in this case, the answer is no, we're not missing anything. This card is kind of as bad as it seems. Like the rate is pretty lousy. You're paying 3 mana to deal 2 damage, which is not good. And then you get to recur it, but not really. And discarding a thing at random is very likely to screw you over. At a minimum, it's going to make you feel bad. I really think it's the at random that's a problem here. I think if this just said discard a card, that wouldn't be OP. It would be marginally playable. It would be kind of like a late game buybacky thing. Like it would be like late game, cast it and discard your lands to do some stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't know. At the price of discarding a card at random, that just seems really annoying and unfun.
Or even if it was just, if you discarded the card before you return Hanabi Blast, not that this would make it good, but at least then you're getting the Hanabi Blast back. Maybe you're willing to sacrifice some of the other stuff in your hand to be able to get another 2 damage in the future. But
yeah, just something to give you a sense of kind of agency or the ability to be clever with it. But I feel like this just kind of, you pay 3 mana to kill a thing, and then potentially you discard your Ryusei, the Falling Star, and you feel really lousy.
Yeah. Well, actually, you mentioned unfun play patterns, and that's what you said just now kind of raises another interesting point, which is that if you had this in your hand with Ryusei, you don't want to play this, right?
Yeah.
Unless
exactly.
you really have to. So now you've got 1 card in your hand, Ryusei, that you're waiting to play. Maybe you are just trying to get up to 6 mana or whatever. You're waiting to play Ryusei, and you've got this Hanabi Blast that you could play, but you don't want to because the risk is too high.
And then maybe you have to because you need to kill a thing, and then you do discard your Ryusei instead of the 3 land that were also in your hand. Like, I don't know. I'm just not sure I want this card. Like, I just feel like I personally don't want this card. Like, I don't want to have to draft it or include it. It's not very interesting or fun to me. It's just kind of annoying.
I feel like these randomness cards are sort of a trap for me because I look at it.
Well, you are a recovering Hearthstone player, so
I am. Like, I love that RNG. I don't think there's really any situation where this card is very good at all. But there's something about like having that extra element of randomness in where, like, if you get lucky, or even here, just like if you don't get unlucky, this does something kind of interesting. I think now that we have sort of talked through it a little more, you've brought me back from the edge of the abyss of randomness.
Yeah, I keep coming back to this question of agency. Like, I like your point that if you discard it and then return that could be interesting and give you a decision point. Obviously, if you chose the card, that could be interesting. Or maybe if you just had a choice, like if it was like, you may return this to your hand, then discard a card at random. Like, just anything to give me some ability to decide how this thing's going to be used and played. But as written, it's just too annoying.
Should we just cut it?
I'd like to just cut it. Let's just insta-cut it. Okay, let's move on to our first Kami in what feels like quite a while. Hearth Kami. Hearth Kami is 1 in red for a 2/1 spirit. X, sack it. Destroy target artifact with mana value X. You know what? Sure. He's a curve filler. He's a 2 mana 2/1, which ain't too shabby. And he's got a pretty decent relevant ability. Like, we were listing out decent equipments earlier. If this can go trade for some solid equipment later in the game when his body's no longer helpful, that's great. You might be able to spirit craft it back. I really like this card. I think it's a really solid curve filler. I still have it as a meh, which actually might be kind of harsh because I don't see a scenario where we cut this. Where do you land on this thing, Connor?
Yeah, I think meh is a little too harsh. To me, I think this is playable, at least. I was a little worried reading it that if we might end up putting too many copies of this in and then find out that there's just too much artifact removal going on in red, but there seem to only be 3 cards in red in the whole block that have anything to do with artifacts. So I don't think there's really a risk of like red having too much artifact removal to the point that it's unfun for anyone running artifacts. So I think he's playable, and I feel like 3 copies is probably a good number to land on.
Yeah, I don't mind 3 of these. I'd rather have these than a Battle Mad Ronin in most situations, for example.
Yeah.
I keep coming back to that card as a card we may have just been too generous to, incidentally.
we're getting more and more angry at him as we go on.
Yeah, also in point in this card's favor is I really like the art. It's this kind of, it's one of these that's really hard to describe, but it's a kind of, I guess, lizard half lizard, half shrine, I guess I would say, creature with kind of a dragon mouth and a bunch of masks. I don't know, look it up. It's just a really nicely executed kind of classic, like choose your favorite body parts Kami in a real, just executed really well by an artist I've never heard of, Luca Zontini. I don't know if they've done too many pieces.
Yeah, I looked him up. He actually has quite a few going back quite a ways.
No, yeah, 64, not too bad.
Yeah.
Looks like mostly active in like up through roughly Ravnica block.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of stuff after that in Time Spiral.
Good stuff, Luca.
Yeah, I like your 3x playable. I don't see a scenario where we cut this, and I don't know, we can dial the quantity up and down, but this seems like a really solid playable card for red that desperately needs some 2-drops.
Yeah, and just desperately needs some solid playable cards. Yeah. Let's go to Honden of Infinite Rage here, our 4th Honden. I can't believe we've gone through so many Honden already.
Yeah.
So the Honden of Infinite Rage is 2R for a legendary enchantment Shrine. At the beginning of your upkeep, Honden of Infinite Rage deals damage to target creature or player equal to the number of shrines you control. So like all of the Hondens we've talked about, this gets stronger with more Hondens. Because each of them are legendary, you can only have one copy of each out. So you can't just, have as many Hondens of Infinite Rage out as you can grab. You can only have one of each color. Which makes it interesting and challenging as a deck building choice or a drafting choice. And every time we come to one of these Honden, this is number 4 now, I need to look back at the ones we've already rated to see how many copies we're going with, because I can never...
Yeah, me too.
I was like, how was it? Are we doing like 4 of each of these to really push them, or was it just one of each? And it looks like we're landing on 2 or 3 copies for each of them. I think we'll have to see whether that is the right number in the future, but if we're still following that convention, I think 3 copies of this Honden makes sense.
3 to 2. I worry that 3 is too many. I feel like the Honden deck is something you should have to work at a little bit to go get into. So I worry that 3 makes them just too easy to come by. I do have this relatively near the top. I've read a decent number of comments about the Honden on various corners of the net, and one of the net, like all the way back in 2004 when the set released.
Yeah, you're really going back to Kamigawa here.
I've been poking around the information superhighway, and what I'm finding is
on the World Wide Web,
as I'm surfing, what I'm finding is that people rank this Honden all over the place. I've seen this ranked like the worst of the 5 Hondens. I've seen it ranked near the top. I put it kind of in the middle and closer to the top. Yeah, 1 damage isn't a lot, but I feel like 1 damage every turn in this set is actually pretty meaningful. You can kill off a lot of things. You can always ping your opponent down. If you get a second Honden out to support it, this becomes just totally nuts. Like 2 damage a turn is really, really good in this context. I like this card a lot.
I can't help but notice you weren't that generous to Frostwielders 1 damage a turn.
Well, yeah, well, there's a couple reasons. The first reason, and actually the only reason, is that Frostwielder isn't a Honden.
You got me there.
Honden of Frost wielding, and she had a Shrine subtype, I would be much more interested.
Frostwielder of Honden.
Frostwielder of Honden. Creature. Human, Shaman, Shrine.
Yeah, we got to get to Theros or something for that.
Aren't the new Hondens? I think they are creatures, right? The ones in Neon Dynasty?
Are they?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're creatures. They're all interesting and weird.
Wow. Yeah. Come a long way since the original.
Well, they're not Hondens. What are they? They're shrines. But what are they? Yeah, like Go Shintai of Ancient Wars and stuff. The Go Shintai cycle. They're all shrines. Legendary enchantment creature shrine.
Wow, I love that.
Before we decide on the quantity, tell me what you think of the art here, because I'm going to be honest, it's not my favorite of the Honden art.
I think this is my least favorite of the Honden art. I don't like how the shrine here is just totally devoid of any context. It's like this really big, spiky looking shrine sort of out in the middle of this gray, flat plain with some mysterious redness on the horizon and these gray clouds above. It looks like we could be maybe on Mirrodin or maybe on the moon or maybe out in the middle of an ocean.
Yeah, I feel like we're maybe in like a mid-90s like rendering program. Like
I think Honden, we are.
The ground, it's like all incredibly flat but shiny and reflective. Yes. Like it's like, ooh, light sources. But yeah, there's not a lot of there's definitely no context, and there's really not that much personality to this art.
Yeah, I'm not feeling it at all. I think the card is definitely working for me though. You I think pretty much hit all the major points, but just being able to get 2 Honden out, with this being one of them, is a really big deal. This is one of the cheaper Honden, actually. Just 2R. So being able to get that kind of 1 damage every turn on turn 3, and then, if you're able to get into a Honden of Seeing Winds maybe on turn 5, and you're drawing 2 cards and dealing 2 damage every turn.
Yeah, it helps hold down the fort kind of in a way that I think the Honden deck needs. It's like, okay, this is some ability to start exercising control over the board while I find and cast my expensive 5-color Hondens.
Exactly. And draw into something to end the game.
I don't know about quantity here. I had 2. I could see 3. I kind of feel like in the end we might cut all of them back to 2, but I'm fine if you want to start it at 3.
I lean more toward 3 on this one because I think it is one of the more impactful Honden, especially compared to like Honden of Knight's Reach or Cleansing Fire, the white one. I think you're probably right that we're at some point going to end up at maybe 2 of each.
Yeah, we can start at a 3x build around though and see how that feels.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Initiate of Blood, our second red flip card, so buckle up. This is going to be a long one. Initiate of Blood is 3R for a 2/2 Ogre Shaman. Tap, Initiate of Blood deals 1 damage to target creature that was dealt damage this turn. When that creature dies this turn, flip it. He flips into Goka the Unjust, a legendary Ogre Shaman, 4/4. Tap, Goka the Unjust deals 4 damage to target creature that was dealt damage this turn. So 4 mana 2/2 that taps to deal 1, that flips into a 4/4 that taps to deal 4. But you always have to have dealt damage to it before. Connor, what was going on in this set that Wizards was so enamored of the idea of dealing damage to things that have already been dealt damage? Like, what is the deal?
It's some kind of weird like pain blood archetype where like you could deal damage, but only if the thing is already a little bit sore or has a little paper cut that you can infect. It's weird and like sad that this is our second flip card in red. Like neither of them are good.
Did they think this was going to be a headline mechanic for the set? Like, I genuinely don't understand why we have 2 or 3 cards with this effect on it.
Yeah, Goka is basically Crushing Pain on a stick, but like with less damage than Crushing Pain. I don't know if this card is that terrible though. Even as bad as we feel about this mechanic, I don't know if the card as a whole is quite as bad as you think it is.
I mean, it's a 4 mana 2/2 that is a Tim that can only damage creatures and only creatures that have already taken damage. So you can't use this to ping down an X1 to flip it. And then it flips into a guy who still has conditionality, but who now has the stat line you would expect for 4 mana. Like, I don't know about this card. I'm an insta-cut on him, honestly. I'm not too high on it.
Maybe I feel more positively toward it because the flip condition is like it's a challenge, but it's not undoable. It's not like our first flip card, the Lavarunner and Tok-Tok. Maybe because this is a 4 mana 2/2 compared to the other red flip card, which is a 4 mana 1/1.
It's double the stat line.
Wow, we've got double the stats here. And then actually Goka's stat line is also double Tok-Tok. So this is just across the board twice as big as the other flip card.
It's clearly twice as good as Instacut Tok-Tok.
Definitely. But I guess 0 times 2 is still 0.
I don't know. I'm fine with including this. I have an Instacut. I don't think it's indefensible. I think we could do it as a meh and see if there's any room for him.
I mean, I have him as a meh 1x because what I want him to do is to be out as Goka while you have a Honden of Infinite Rage, a Frostwielder, or a Kumano, something that can just do a little ping, and then Goka comes in, brings the Crushing Pain, and now you have removal on 2 sticks.
I was hoping you were going to say and instead of or there, that you would have just this entire like pinging tribal deck. And, in a weird way, that's kind of sold me. Like, this is a set.
Doesn't that sound fun?
It does sound fun. And this is also a set that is not about like single card game winning scenarios. Right. It is much more about grinding out value. So, maybe there's room for the Initiate of Blood.
Yeah, I think we should try him.
All right, we can try him.
But speaking of Crushing Pain, this art really hurts me. Goka, the flipped version, he's super symmetrical
You just hate symmetry.
I hate symmetry when it's you look at him here and he's looking right at the viewer, just smack head on, just staring straight at you, and he's almost totally symmetrical. Like his axes, he's dual wielding these big axes and they're totally identical, holding them the same way. Like his musculature on both sides is completely the same. It feels so stiff and uninteresting. It feels like what happened here is Carl Critchlow, the artist, started with Goka, finished him up, and then realized, hold on, there's not that much room left for the Initiate on the other side here. So the Initiate of Blood, who's this measly little 2/2 ogre shaman, is kind of shoved off to the left side of the frame, and he looks so stiff and derpy. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. You should go look this card up, Initiate of Blood, to see just how awkward and weird this ogre looks. Like he looks like,
it's not that bad.
It's pretty bad. I mean, his pose, he looks like, a really uncomfortable, tall 7th grader, like standing at the edge of the gym waiting to get picked for dodgeball, and he knows no one's going to pick him.
You know what else Carl Critchlow did is Crushing Pain.
Oh.
But I do want to say
it's all coming together.
He maybe had an off day with this block because he has 232 pieces throughout almost all of Magic's history. And
yeah.
He's done bangers like Darksteel Colossus or Cursed Ronin, which we were absolutely raving about an episode or two ago. So he's got some really solid cards in there.
Yeah, I know him. Like, he pops up all the time in Magic, which is why I find this piece and Crushing Pain, honestly, kind of upsetting.
He disappointed you.
He did.
Have you let him know?
We're working on that. Carl Critchlow, if you're listening to the show,
email us so we can send you more feedback.
clockspinningpodcast@gmail.com.
All right. I'm fine with your 1x math as a starting point.
All right. I like it. All right. Another Kami here. Kami of Fire's Roar. 3R for a 2/3 spirit. Whenever you play a spirit or arcane spell, target creature can't block this turn.
Arrgh.
Oh, what was that?
I was roaring.
Oh, that was the roar? That was the Fire's Roar?
I was going to do it at the start, but I forgot, so I just threw it in.
Oh, I thought maybe that was your dog grumbling near the microphone.
See, it's pretty convincing. Sorry, go ahead. You were going to talk about the card.
I mean, there's not all that much to talk about here. This card is not especially cool or interesting, but the Spirit Craft ability, like being able to shut something off from blocking for a turn, could actually win some games here and there.
It's kind of a textbook meh, isn't it? Like,
it really is.
It's not unplayable. It's just at the bottom of meh in my mind. Like, it's a 4-mana 2/3, which is not a good stat line. And then it's got this ability that's also kind of marginal. Like, I think you said earlier in the episode that red is typically an attacking kind of aggressive offensive color. In this set, there's a weird number of cards that seem to assume red is playing defensively. And then there's a handful like this that are like, well, yeah, but you want to attack too. Like, I don't know. I do worry with this thing that it's like, I don't know, you get a Spirit Craft trigger a turn and one of their things can't block. Like, does that really let you get through with your, with your 2/3? Like, I do have some skepticism about whether the Kami of Fire's Roar really has any impact on the game.
Yeah, now that I'm kind of thinking through, how this would actually play, I feel like a lot of times, I think in the cube environment, Spirit Craft is going to be a mechanic that is a really nice thing to have when it happens for you, but not something that you can really set up very reliably. I worry that with Kami of Fire's Roar, like, you need to have the Spirit Craft trigger on the turn that you want to attack, when you have the creature that you want to attack with, and the target that you want to prevent blocking. And to have all of that line up with the timing of the Spirit or Arcane spell that you actually want to play, where you're not, either playing the Spirit or Arcane spell when you don't want to play it, and then not having this trigger work out, which is probably what you'll do most of the time just because you want to play the Spirit, and then this trigger ends up being meaningless, or you play that Spirit or Arcane spell at a bad time just for this ability, which feels like a feel bad.
What if we go back to our Earthshaker idea that we're inventing some kind of blue-red flyers Spirit Craft kind of deck? Does this have any place in that? Like, its job is to let prevent their single flying blocker from blocking so you can get through. I feel like I'm concocting a very elaborate scenario here.
I was going to say the Flyers part of the blue-red Flyers deck would kind of make this probably meaningless.
Well, but they have one flying blocker, so you knock it out of the way with the Kami of Fire's Roar and you get them. That's how your Soratami Mirror Guard, who I think I cut actually, how it gets through.
Well, the Mirror Guard can actually give something unblockable, so that's sort of funny that you picked that one.
Okay. Are we still a meh after all this?
I feel like if we're working this hard to try to figure out where this fits in, that probably means it doesn't, right?
Yeah, I worry that you're right. I don't know why I worry, because it's not like it's a great card. I do love the art here. The art is this kind of bestial creature that looks like it's made out of lava. It's kind of melting a little bit, like one of those Hawaiian magma flows. And it's on fire, and it's on this kind of very Japanesey mountainside with a bunch of little lantern shrines behind it. And to me, it looks like an illustration from a like mid 80s through mid 2000s D&D monster manual. And yeah, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's nice.
Like, you're gonna go fight this thing. The little flames around him are actually little faces. They're almost like potobos or something. Anyway, I really like the art.
The flavor text is kind of interesting too. It's more Reto related flavor text. It says, "I can hear the shamans chanting in the hills. They say their magic will protect us from the Kami, that our gold has bought our safety, but no one sleeps soundly tonight." Scroll fragment from the ruins of Rieto. So as we all know, Austin and I are kind of connoisseurs of this historical event.
Yeah, I wrote my thesis on it.
Right.
That's part of how I qualified to appear on this podcast, was my master's thesis on the Rieto massacre.
Yeah, you're kind of a renowned expert on Hirobi, the whole history of that. So kind of cool flavor text.
Yeah, I'm actually on the Ask Historian subreddit. The clock spinning account is flared as an expert on the Rieto massacre. That's totally true.
That's a really, really hoppin' corner of the internet right there.
It's a good flavor text. I like it because it ties back to the lore, but in a more subtle way. And it actually ties really nicely to the flavor text. And it's not like the Kami became unblockable or something. It's like,
we couldn't block it.
we no matter what we did. But it's implied, right? It's implied like something about, it's a little hard to know why the Fire's Roar makes it unblockable. Actually, I'm not really clear on, is he scaring them off? Is he
he must be scaring them, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, I don't know where to land on this thing. I think we probably should insta-cut it. I have a weird soft spot, but I think, I don't know, we should just cut it. Let's just cut it and move on, Connor. It's painful for some reason.
All right. I don't want to drag this out for you.
Okay, thank you. All right, our last card of the day, and I'm pleased to say it is an iconic cool card. Kiki-Jiki, Mirror Breaker. Kiki-Jiki is 2 RRR, so 3 designated red, for a 2/2 legendary goblin shaman. Haste. Tap, create a creature token that's a copy of target non-legendary creature you control. That token has haste. Sacrifice it at end of turn. Wow, this is such an iconic card. It's incredibly, before we get into our own playability of it, this is probably the most notable card from this set, at least in red for Cube. It appears in 8,724 cubes on Cube Cobra. That's 15.7% of all the cubes that exist on Cube Cobra.
Wow.
So it's a really iconic card, probably one of the most famous from the whole set.
But surprisingly unpopular as a commander. He shows up in just like 320-something decks on EDH Rec. He gets edged out in this set by Isamaru, Hound of Konda, and Seizon.
Really?
Big Oni Lord. Yeah, both of them are more popular than him as a commander.
Wow.
But he is pretty popular in EDH overall, just showing up in decks. He's in about 5% of decks. Yeah,
it's not too shabby.
Yeah. There's also a lot of kind of interesting combos that have been proposed on Gatherer involving Kiki-Jiki. He screams combo potential here, making copies of other creatures with haste. Most of those combos on Gatherer involve a card called Sky Hussar, which is from Dissension. And I think it's basically a big blue-white flyer that untaps everything when it comes into play. So I think the idea is you just get infinite Sky Hussars with Kiki-Jiki. and then fly your opponent to death.
Yeah, and there's a good number of these, like Deceiver Exarch. In Vintage Cube, you have Deceiver Exarch and Pestermite, both of which also untap a thing when they enter the battlefield, so you can get a nice infinite combo going. Unfortunately, I don't think there is any infinite combo or really combo with Kiki-Jiki in this set.
Yeah, not even a combo.
There is value, though. Like, there are a lot of things that care about dying or about other things dying. And Kiki-Jiki does cause things to die. And, I think getting a copy of your best creature every turn is really pretty good value. If you've got, like, even a Kami of Fire's Roar, I don't know, if you get a, like, 2-3 every turn out of this thing that can crash in, I don't think that's the end of the world. I think that's a pretty solid effect.
Yeah, and this kind of, if you're really on the back foot, you can keep using Kiki-Jiki to copy one of your creatures to be just an infinite chump blocker.
You can temporarily level up your brother's Yamazaki. Oh wait, he can't copy Legends.
I guess, yeah, here's another card that cares about Legendary.
Yeah, in the sense of punishing you.
Yeah, frustrating. I mean, I guess it makes sense though, because if you made a copy of anything other than the brothers,
yeah, but they could make a non-legendary copy or something. There's a way, I'm sure.
If we just move the word non-legendary in front of copy instead of in front of creature here, then it would work perfectly.
I'm sure it works perfectly within the rules. Do not send us emails. It works. Okay.
It works. Trust us.
It's nice for copying Zubera. You get them, they maybe do a thing and then they die, and you get their little triggers. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be exceptional. I think he's going to be more decent, but I'm kind of fine with that for how iconic he is. It's really hard for me to see this cube without Kiki-Jiki in it.
I mean, I think he definitely has to be in. I just struggle to see the situation where he really, pops off and shines, especially because he's triple designated in red.
Yeah.
Like, this is not a color that you're going to want to go into super heavily, and you kind of have to get Kiki-Jiki. And then chances are, if you're that heavily invested in red, you probably don't have that many great creatures you want to copy, but he's still got to be in.
They were clearly pretty nervous, I think, about this effect, and the combo potential here, because that mana cost is pretty brutal.
Yeah, it hurts. 5 mana 2/2. That's, basically the same rate as our 4 mana 1/1 Akki from the beginning of our episode.
Yeah, I think he's an easy auto include though. Yeah. Despite that stat line.
Yeah. Let's put him in at least for the memes.
All right, boom. Well, that's it for today's episode, because it's time for us to start researching this Patreon exclusive, exhaustively documented history of the 4 mana 1/1s in Magic. We're not necessarily going to do that, by the way, and there is no Patreon, don't worry. But in the meantime, here's a little Amuse-Bouche for everybody. Red is, in fact, the king of the 4 mana 1/1. By my count, there are 14 in white, 11 in blue, 22 in black, 24 in red, 19 in green. And to really bring home the useless trivia for you there, white is the only color that does not have a silver bordered 4 mana 1/1. So, keep that one in your back pocket. You're going to need it someday.
That is a deep cut.
That's what we're here for. If you have feedback, thoughts, or memories to share about any of the cards or topics we talked about today, or about Champions of Kamigawa cards we haven't gotten to yet, please email us at clockspinningpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow along with the Cube on Cube Cobra. Just check out clockspinning.com for links. So next week, join us. We're going to be reviewing the remaining 25 red cards of Kamigawa, from Kumano to Zozu. Great names. Something to look forward to. But until then, I'm Austin.
And I'm Connor.
Thanks for listening.